Morning, everybody. My name is Chris Seamus. I'm the area rep for Valent USA. And first, I'd like to say thank you to the Farm Bureau for this opportunity and putting on this great event. And also, I wanted to say thanks to the growers in the room for buying branded products. Just one little plug here that when you guys choose to buy a branded product, you're in essence contributing to research and development to bring new products to our industry. And Valent's got a couple herbicides and fungicides coming out shortly, or in the near future, rather. Anyway, and it's you guys supporting us and other branded makes that possible. All right, so let's just jump into Zeal MVP. Zeal MVP was a very popular miticide this past summer. I mean, everyone realizes that the mite population, mite pressure was extreme this past summer, and a lot of Zeal MVP got used. And although I didn't really put it in part of this presentation, I'm just going to get it out of the way now. Odor was a major problem, right? The Zeal MVP has a strong smell to it that is not very pleasant, but it's the solvents in there that have this odor, makes it work better, but consequently also makes it smell bad. So really the moral of the story now is just like, be respectful to your neighbors, understand, where they are, their concerns, when you're going to be spraying Zeal MVP, and realize that, other people might be, negatively affected by its smell. But really, it's a good time to have conversations with your neighbors. Tell them what's going to be happening so it's not a surprise. They'll keep their windows closed that night, and, it'll all be gone in a day or so. So, it's just one of those times where we need to, be mindful of the surroundings, especially when you're using Zeal MVP. One thing that I know the DPR is struggling or dealing, coming out with, odor versus drift. And, our contention is odor is not drift, but that is something that, have to be, adjudicated later. But, if odor was drift, then every dairyman in the county would have problems. And, and then when you go to the gas station, you pump gas, you smell gas, but it's not drift. But anyway, so those are things that we're going to have to deal with. But, keep in mind, really the point is, be aware when you're spraying this that other people could be affected and, negatively by the smell. And we want to encourage better conversations for our rural neighbors. A couple products, things that will help with this odor are there's two products that we recommend. One's called Odor Mask from Brandt, and another one is Ventry or Wetsit from Rosenda Ag. So these are just adjuvants that you can add to your tank, and it'll make that smell, much less severe. Anyway, so that's my 2 cents on drift or odor, rather. Zeal miticide. Okay, fight the mite. So it's a Zeal MVP. It's a EC formulation. It's same toxazole that was in the Zeal WSP. But now it's a liquid version. This proprietary formula, with those solvents and oils that I mentioned, really do make it a better, superior product. Zeal is primarily, I'm probably going to jump around a bit in these slides, but I'll talk in front of myself, honestly. But, Zeal is really a better ovicide in how it works. In other words, you want to go early. But it does, affect all life stages of the mites. The nymphs will not be able to molt to the next life stage, so they'll starve out before they, become adults. And then the adults will also become sterile. So, the female mites will become sterile, so they can't, their eggs will be non-fertile. Think of it as ovicide. You want to get in it early, and that's when you're going to get the best control. So this slide just kind of gets us some of the highlights, but the measuring, the easier pouring, that's this liquid formulation, better than the dry soluble packets, and that product is still available. But oftentimes those packets don't dissolve very quickly. They'll plug up. They'll get kind of gummed up in the filters occasionally, especially in high boron water. So this new formulation, does have some ease in handling. And not to mention that with those solvents and the oils, we're doing a better job of killing the adult mites. Here we go. Here's just an illustration of the life stages. The ones I mentioned earlier, the eggs. That's really, we want to be early with Zeal. That's the trick. Oftentimes, I'll tell you what happened this past summer. I think a lot of guys got lulled to sleep with the cooler June that we had, and then the last day of June and then first week of July, the heat wave just came on so strong, and whole split wasn't for another 7-8 days, and they waited, and I think that's honestly where a lot of problems got started. They wanted to wait until whole split to put on your miticide, and honestly it probably should have happened in the last week of June. This is just some of the nuts and bolts. 32 ounces is a very common rate. It is labeled for 24 to 34, but quite honestly, with the package size, a quart per acre makes it very handy. Although I'll tell you, a lot of guys with silage corn, 24 ounces was a fairly common rate, and we had good control at 24 with silage corn. You're allowed one application per season. Make sure to take note of this part. Do not use a sticker type of a adjuvant. We want something that's going to penetrate. It's got enough oils and solvents in there. It's really going to do a lot of that by itself. But if you're going to add anything else, or if there's other tank mix partners that you're going to add, do not use a sticker type of an adjuvant. Think of it. You want more penetration. So like often a common one is 415 oil, and that works really well too. Depending on the crop, and I think there's a list here a little bit later, but anyway, for almonds, it's a 28-day pre-harvest interval. Corn is 21, and there are some crops where it's much shorter, like strawberries, for instance. It's only a 1-day PHI, but generally, for the crops we grow around here, 14 to 28 days, and it's a 12-hour re-entry into the field. Oh, yeah, one point here, I do want to make pH of your spray tank. So it's got a pretty wide range, 5.5 to 8 pH of the water. But, if you're dealing with some wells that maybe, can be problematic, make sure you're testing that water after you make your mix, because you want to get that pH in with at least within that zone. A little bit lower is, on the lower end of that range, I think is preferred. Somewhere around 6. But if you stay with that 5.5 to 8, that the half-life of that product is fairly high in the tank. Still, we would recommend spray it within 6 hours of mixing. So if you got your tractor tire blowout, get it sprayed and fixed pretty quick, and that product will still be good. Okay, I'm not sure why this is, a little chemistry of the atoxazole, but there you go. That's what it looks like. It's the most important part in here is this group 10B. So when you're alternating miticides, just you're not going to want to follow a 10B with a 10A. Switch your class of chemistry. Fungicide groups have, kind of honed in on the term, the FRAC group, right? Well, of course, there's IRAC groups for insecticides. So we want, just rotating that chemistry in your miticides as well. So don't follow a 10B with a 10A. Okay, here's a real busy slide with some of those pre-harvest intervals that I mentioned. You can see on the far right, 0 days, which is not actually true, 1 day for California. But anyway, but most commonly, it's going to be, in that 21 to 28 days. And you can see that's a wide range of crops that it's registered on. So it's, you could, if you're growing more than just one crop in your farm, chances are you'll be able to use Zeal MVP. Okay, some performance. So here's some of the things that that we found about Zeal MVP compared to Zeal. We're getting 7 more days of activity in the tissue, and then another 12 days of before you would need to retreat compared to the dry atoxazole. So anyway, that's why we think Zeal MVP is the miticide for the future. It gives us very long longevity. Okay, here we go. So the green bar on the left is Zeal MVP. The blue is dry atoxazole, and the other lighter gray and darker gray colors, some competitors. Anyway, so the first group there in the 7 days of after application, you can see there's other miticides that will have a better knockdown. Neither Zeal is really considered a knockdown material, although the MVP does a better job. But on the right-hand side of after 28 days, 21 to 28, Zeal MVP begins to separate from the pack, and the statistical differences are enough that you can see that we do have superior control. That was almonds. Okay, in the grapes, same kind of a scenario. Maybe the others had an even better knockdown, but then after that 21, 28 day time period, the Zeal MVP is still outperforming them. Best management practices. Well, back to that odor business. Just be cognizant of your neighbors and make sure that they understand what's happening and they don't get surprised. But we want to. When the hot weather is coming, we want to, you want to put error on the side of going early with Zeal or Zeal MVP, and spray in the nighttime or early morning when the drying conditions are slower. Because Zeal does not have, neither Zeal has a much of a knockdown. You're going to still see some mites out there for another 7 days, 10 days. So, don't panic when you go out a week later after application, you still see some mites. They're going to be there, but they're slowly, the population is slowly dying off. And then we certainly don't recommend retreating until, give it at least a full 14 days. Even under the most extreme pressure, you're probably going to still see some mites there after that 10 days, but in 14 days, usually that's when the party is over. So this mite threshold should drive application, not timing, not the calendar, or that should, anyway, the calendar. Don't rely on the calendar. Don't rely strictly on something like hole split. Although we, of course, would love it if you didn't have a mite pressure until hole split, but oftentimes it does happen, and waiting until that key timing when you're going to go in for a navel orangeworm spray, oftentimes it's too late for that first mite application. I have, some most of my territory is in this northern part of the San Joaquin Valley, but I do have some customers in the more central part of the San Joaquin Valley, and they started getting some mite pressure, started seeing some mites in May, and they added some Zeal in with a fungicide spray, a rust alternaria type of a spray, and doing that in May, and they got great control all the way, up to hole split, and then they added another miticide. But anyway, the point is going early definitely works better. And certainly in years where we have mild winters, the populations haven't really been decimated, and they'll rebuild much more quickly. So just be aware of what that winter is like. Just a little bit about coverage, et cetera. One mantra that we've got is speed does not kill. That, if you're going faster in your orchard isn't going to give you any, benefits because other than maybe the fact that you get it done faster. But here's a little, we put on some spray tabs in the, water sensitive paper into the orchards, and you can see a big difference between driving 1.5 miles an hour and 3.5 miles an hour. So we want good coverage, and so slower you go, the better job you're going to have. So that's more or less Zeal MVP in a nutshell. Fight the mite. Any Zeal MVP questions in the audience before I move on to the next?
Yeah, we have one over here.
Insecticide? Yeah, we got one back there.
What's the recommendation for first leaf amines?
First leaf amines? Yeah. So, we'd still, I would say go more of a parts per million type of application. Mix it up into 32 ounces and 100 gallons of water, but then spray to good coverage, right? So if you can get it done with 50 gallons of water, 25 gallons of water, really go with your coverage. Let that be your guide on how much to put on. So you may be down into that 16 ounce per acre kind of a rate, but I would do your calculations based on 100 gallons of water. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it pretty much does.
Okay. And we've got a booth on the side over there that if you got any questions later, you can come ask me. Yep.
Chris, you said err on the early side because it doesn't have knockdown. What does the early side mean? Like how early is too early and how late is too late?
Okay. Thank you for that. That's a good clarification question. So on the early side, our threshold is really 1 mite per 7 leaves. So when you're scouting your orchard, you're going through there, taking samples out and looking at them. If you find for every 7 leaves, you find 1 mite, it's time to write the rec, get the product out there, and spray as soon as convenient. I wouldn't say at that point it's certainly not an emergency. I wouldn't panic over it, but that's sort of the threshold for getting the party started. Go too late. If they're already laying eggs, if you're seeing lots of eggs on those leaves, pick a different miticide.
How is this with beneficials?
Very safe on beneficials.
Just real fast, I'm the Ag Commissioner for Stanislaus County. I'm Linda Pinfold. And Chris, I just want to say thank you so much for this presentation. One thing I also want to underscore, though, with this material, as well as, if you will, other materials that may be, if you will, stinky, is to really be careful or to really consider who is around your orchards that you're going to be, your fields that you're going to be applying this materials. Especially if you have that ag-urban interface. My office is responsible to do investigations when we get complaints. And you're right. DPR, a complaint for odor is we have to investigate that. I always kind of try to help people understand, though, that it's kind of like perfume. Somebody can get sprayed, they put perfume on, but everybody else might smell that. Some people are okay with it, others might have an issue, but that doesn't mean that they got sprayed with, they've been necessarily exposed to that perfume, right? But we do have to investigate that. And so that's what I want to make sure that I have a chance to be able to keep, to ask you to please keep in mind. And I'm really glad that you talked about ways that growers can mitigate odors. So really think about who your neighbors are, especially if your fields, orchards might be near where there's a lot of housing. It's more of a statement than it is a question. Thanks.
Appreciate those statements. And yeah, we really have good conversations with your neighbors, and that's going to get you out of a lot of trouble. Okay, so next we're going to talk about Senstar. So Senstar is a premix that we introduced a couple of years ago. It's I'll just kind of let the cat out of the bag. It's a premix of Movento and Seas. Sometimes Seas, you use brands like Esteem or NAC. It's all the same. It's pyroproxyfen. So Senstar is a premix of Movento and pyroproxyfen. So you get two modes of action in the same jug. We've got, it's provides a lot of systemic activity. It's very systemic. So, anyway, that's, obviously one of its, main features. It is also translaminar and is very safe on beneficials. So, some farmer-friendly parts about this product, that the Spire Tetramat will really affect the older juveniles and adults. The pyroproxyfen is really on an ovicide, and as well as it's a juvenile mimic hormone. So those young nymphs, larvae, cannot progress to the next life stage. So you can see there in the red and green and blue, none, good, and best. By combining those, we're covering every aspect of killing insects. So the pyroproxyfen is, group 7, the Spire Tetramat's group 23. It really doesn't mean much for you, but anyway, the fact is that this, for soft-bodied insects, so Senstar has become, very popular in dealing with things like scale, aphid, the formulation, the suspal emulsion. So that's what really makes this one different than if you were just to buy those same two products and put them in the tank. The chemistry of those don't really allow them, they don't play well with each other in the current formulations that they were when they were separate. So the chemists in Valent, went to work and figured out what's the best way to make this formulation work, and came up with this other thing called suspal emulsion. And basically, it allows them both to coexist in the tank and perform well with each other. And then when they get into the plant, then that's where the magic happens. So the chemistry does make a difference, or the formulation definitely does make a difference. Here we go. So I mentioned, aphids, whiteflies. Really, I wish this chart mentioned scale. That's really where it's going to have a better fit in our part of the world. Think of like walnuts, frosted scale, walnut scale for that matter, Lacanian scale. Those are all places where it does have a good fit. Another one that's becoming more of a problem in our area is in pistachios with Gill's mealybug. So that's it's got some real advantages in the Gill's mealybug department. But it's got many other crops that it's labeled on, lots of other pests. The other one around here that could have some action is that the onions for the western flower thrip. So, keep that in mind if that's part of your cropping program, or if you're a PCA, if you've got onions. It did very well in some trials at the Oregon State. Okay, moving on, more labeled crops, who cares? But anyway, well, these are permanent crops. So there's lots of options. Citrus in the southern part of the San Joaquin Valley, that's where it's probably has its best fit, or its most action right now, but hopefully we'll change that here in the northern part of the state. Okay, how it works. So we're, effective on all life stages, like I've said earlier, the eggs and the crawlers. The contact activity will come, the Spire Tetramat is not really a contact. It has to be, converted in the plant, those enols into into the insecticide portion. So it takes a little bit of metabolizing in the plant. But the pyroproxyfen portion, if it is the contact activity, or that is if we do touch it, the crawlers crawl over it, or they begin to feed on it, that's where the pyroproxyfen begins to work. This slide doesn't really help us much, but you get the point. It's the juvenile hormone, the mimic, that makes the pyroproxyfen work, and very active on the Spire Tetramat. Certainly, once it gets into the plant, the adults and older juveniles begin to feed on it, they'll just kill them outright. Okay, I already mentioned the susceptible emulsion. I'm trying to rush through. I don't want to rush, but we have a couple other presentations to have here in the next 20 minutes or 15 minutes rather. So for grapes. So grapes is an issue. It is labeled for grapes. It's fully registered and we have all the MRLs, but the European Union has a certain opinion about insect growth regulators, which is what pyroproxivate is. And so currently, the major wineries, to be unnamed, one is very close, decided that they don't want to use insect growth regulators as part of their program. So they have a prohibition about using Senstar. So if you or your PCAs, if you guys have a smaller winery where you know where the marketing is, if it's all the wine is sold in the United States or North America for that matter, then you could use it without any problems. But because of some other major wineries say no, you got to know where your crop is going, obviously. But as far as mealybug goes, vine mealybug, grape mealybug, it is an absolute destroyer. And so it's a shame that we're not allowed to use it in the wine grape business, but maybe something we have had scores of residue studies, and somehow we still haven't been able to prove our case. But anyway, we're making some progress, we think, so maybe someday soon. Timing for that would be in the really around bloom is probably the best timing to put it on, although it could be a little earlier, a little later. But I think, for me, for vine mealybug in particular, a bloom time application is best. Or, just, you don't have to spray it during bloom, maybe right after bloom, right before bloom, either way. But that's really that kind of matches with the insect activity when those vine mealybug crawlers begin to, come out of the cordon and into the canes. That's really the best time to hit it. We won't dwell on it too longer because we can't use it. But you could tell, adding the pyroproxivant to the Movento, it does make it, work better. You can see there, percentage of bunches infested. Senstar, is the clear winner. Tree nuts. So there we go with the scale I was talked about. So for instance, walnut scale. A good time would be in that May to early June time frame, and you can really. My advice is to time that with a early part of your codling moth spray, particularly if you've got some aphids showing up. Early codling moth time, degree day model timing, that's the best time to put on Senstar. Cater it to the other pests that you're going after, not so much the scale, but you will wipe out the scale at that point. Well, actually, so a little anecdote. Locally, I had a trial in Ripon where we had the very mature trees, huge canopy, and they had frosted scale that was it was disgusting in the top part of the canopy. It was just loaded. We sprayed Senstar on basically June 15th and then evaluated it on July 15th. And it was awesome. It was a smoke show. We, went up, borrowed the grower's tree squirrel, got at the top part of the canopy as far as we could get, big poles to cut off branches, and untreated was just sticky, gooey, gross. But the treated section, and we know that we didn't get clear coverage up to the top part of the canopy with the sprayer. The trees were too large. But when we cut those branches up there on the treated section, it was total annihilation. So it just goes to the solubility, the systemic activity of this product. So Gill's mealybug, here we go. Once again, the percent control much higher with Senstar than the competitor for the Gill's mealybug. Best practices. So because it's a susceptible emulsion, it'll go in the later part of the tank mix. So, you can see there it's under, I think, 7. So we get close to the end when you're getting ready to close the lid and go. So that's where you're going to want to put it. Once again, we do not want a sticker involved. This is another one where you want better penetration. So pick an adjuvant that's going to give you some better penetration. pH is in that 5 to 8.5. You don't go below 4 or above 8.5. It just won't last very long in the tank. And pollinator, okay, it's very safe on bees. You can see there that, LD50 is, very, very, safe. Well, just, in other words, it's very safe on bees. And that's pretty much it. So, any questions on Senstar before I hand over the mic? Now I'd like to introduce Kevin Campos. So Kevin also works for Valent. He's our Sustainable Solutions Specialist, and he's going to talk about, give you a presentation of our new insecticide, Debug, and maybe if there's time left, some Dipel. Here you go, Kevin.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so like Chris said, my name's Kevin Campos. I'm our Sustainable Solutions Specialist at Valent. I kind of handle on the grower side of things. I live up in Chico, and I cover from Northern California all the way down to Merced. So you guys are all right in my neck of the woods. Come see me after if you want at the booth. I got my business card. We can always get together and talk about Debug or any of our other sustainable portfolio products. But Debug kind of just came into our portfolio this year. It is made by MGK. They acquired it a few years ago, and they sold it themselves for a little while, and they decided to let us just kind of take the reins on it. So we just acquired the rights to sell it on October 1st. So I'm still learning a lot about it myself, but in the time I've had it, I've been trying to really deep dive into it and kind of figure out what's going on. So Debug is an OMRI certified insecticide. It's also got some fungicide activity and even some miticides going on. It combines two active ingredients. It's a neem oil and a azadirachtin. I know many of you have probably used one or the other in the past with some competitive products. Neem oil would be like a Nemix. Aza would be Azagard. But anyway, the neem oil is a suffocant. It's a repellent. It's also a fungicide. The azadirachtin's an IGR. It's also an anti-feedant. So what the difference between Debug versus all the Azas and all that is it puts them in the same tank. So I know some guys you can tank mix and all that, but this gives you a good tank combo for going after certain insects in the organic or conventional world. So I'll talk a little bit about each AI. So I'm going to start with Aza. It's a unique mode of action. They both come from the same plant derivative. They're both from neem oil or neem seeds. It's just a different extraction process. One's through a cold press and one's through extraction. So with Aza, for the way the insect gets killed, it's through ingestion. It's a broad spectrum, but it's one of those insecticides, the earlier you put it on, the better. It doesn't have a super long residual, so you want to make sure your coverage is really good. And the other reason that we do this tank mix is because when you add the neem oil to it, it actually helps with the plant absorbing it and holding on to it, and it helps with the UV degradation. Another product we have, Pyganic, is the same kind of way. Basically, when the sun hits it, it's dry and it kind of loses its efficacy. So when you put that oil with it, it kind of helps protect it and keep it protected on those leaves, on whatever you're spraying. Gives it a little bit more punch of efficacy before it kind of fizzles out and did what it can. So with the neem oil, it's another unique mode of action. The route of entry with the insects is through ingestion, direct coating, and absorption. So it's got a little more ways to get into that insect and help you get that control than the Aza does by itself. And it actually has a little bit longer extended residual activity. You're going to get a little bit more out of that. And like I said, when you combine the both, it's going to help that Aza get a little bit longer of an activity as well. This is definitely a program approach with the organic model. This isn't going to be a spray at once and it's going to be done in most systems. That'd be great. I know we'd all wish we could do that, but this is going to be a lot of get it in your program, rotate with other chemistries. It works in the conventional model. Obviously, you have the conventional insecticides to work with as well, but definitely thrives in that organic market, especially in certain cropping systems. The tree nut guys aren't using it a ton yet, but the veggie guys have really gotten a lot of use out of it. Some of the real big guys down south have really adopted this into their program. So like I said, it improves your efficacy and reduces resistance. Just like any IPM program, you want to rotate through chemistries to keep your resistance at a minimal. When you have that neem oil with the AZA, like I said, it helps penetrate the plant tissue and the plant and the insects themselves. And you know, if you can get two together to give you a bigger bang for your buck, that's always going to be a win. And it's got, if you combine them, it also helps the resistance. It's really just a big IPM approach. You know, there's plenty of organic products out there. They all do their thing. None of them are going to be the standalone knockout like some of the conventionals can be. But you really just want to have that IPM approach with it. And with this Debug having 2 AIs into one jug, it really is going to help you guys really get the control you need and help that population stay below the thresholds. So we have 3 different formulations. We have the Trace, Turbo, and On. So the On is actually just the neem oil. So if there are situations where you want to go out with just the neem oil, there are some instances where that might be all you need. We do have a SKU for that. It's just a 70% neem oil. It's just like a Neemix or something else you're going to go out with that you've probably used in the past. The other 2 are the combinations. So the Turbo is going to be a little bit less AZA and a little bit more neem oil. And that one's going to get you, different levels of control. It's really just the certain insects have different tolerances to the neem versus the AZA. So it really comes down to what kind of you guys are looking for. The Debug Trace is the one that's got more AZA, a little and some less neem oil. That one's going to have probably a little bit more of a punch to it with that extra AZA. But it all goes back to just like what I was saying earlier. Not everything's a one-size-fits-all. I'll be in the back if you have any questions with any of these products. But it's really just a program approach with these different SKUs here. And it's just a matter of what you guys need in your portfolio and what you're kind of trying to control. Like I said, I'm still trying to learn a lot about it. I'm learning a little bit at a time. I'm hoping by the season I'll have a lot better grasp on a lot of this going on. But feel free to reach out with any questions you guys might have on it. And I think that is what I've got with the debug slides. So the next one I'm going to talk about is Dipel. It is one of our oldest chemistries in the portfolio. It is a BT. I'm sure many of you organic guys or even conventional guys have messed around with BTs before. Dipel actually a couple years ago celebrated its 50th year on the market. So it's been around for a while, and it's proven its efficacy, and especially in the OMRI organic world. I know there's plenty of other BTs to choose from, but time and time again, when we still do updated trials, we still compare it, and with the formulation they do over at VBS over in Illinois, it just seems to have superior quality over other BTs. So I just wanted to kind of just reiterate on it. It's a BT. It's BTs are really designed to go after Lepidoptera pests, to go after those larvae. It's excellent for resistant management, like I said with the Debug. You really want to rotate through chemistries to help with that. And it's got over 200 crops on the label. Almost every crop we grow in the valley down here is going to be on that label. We've got 2 formulations. The most common is a dry flowable, 0-day PHI. So that's really important. I've got some conventional guys that like to put it out right before harvest, especially in almonds for NOW. They like to go and just kind of get that last little punch right before if they can. It's highly selective, super friendly on beneficials, so you don't have to worry about that. It's also got just good efficacy on, you might be going out one pest and it's going to help you with any other let pests that you might have out there in the larva stage. Like I said, it's a feeding inhibitor. So basically, coverage is super important with this product. You want to really make sure you get it all over the plant because basically the larva has to eat the plant and it ingests this BT, and then it will basically starve the larva from the inside out. It will put holes in their midgut, and they will no longer be able to feed. And it's really a cruel process in the scheme of things, but basically starves that little worm until it can't survive any longer. So these are just some of the crops and pests that it might be down in this area. Grapes, you know, it's a few of the pests that we don't have too much. The skeletonizer down here, I know it's not a huge issue, but over here in the tree nut world, codling moth, PTB, they haven't updated this with the NOW, but it's got great NOW control. And then tomatoes, tomato fruit worm, hornworm, and armyworm. We've had some pretty good results with the armyworm and tomatoes. And then here's just a couple extra. This is just some more info on it. The packaging, they either come in 1 pound bags or 40 pound bags, depending on the formulation. The rate per acre is usually 1 to 2 pounds per acre. So depending on what you're going after, or if you're tank mixing maybe in a conventional system, you can go with that 1 pound. We try to tell guys 2 pounds obviously going to work a little better, but I know cost is always an issue, and especially this day and age right now. In that conventional world, if you're going with a conventional insecticide, that 1 pound's usually going to be a pretty good kicker for you. So this is just a little trial. This is for yellow striped armyworm and corn earworm control in tomatoes. As you can see, Dipel worked pretty dang good. Coragen is, you know, a conventional insecticide. It was lights out of one of our competitors, but Dipel held its own as far as fruit injury, and it's an organic thing. So your organic growers, you can be pretty trusted that Dipel is going to do pretty well for you there. Here's just another one, some grape leaf skeletonizer. Dipel at 2 pounds versus 1 pound. So really no whole lot of difference. So if your population's kind of not too crazy, you go with that 1 pound and you can save yourself a little bit of money. Still know you're going to get some pretty good control with that. And then this is in PTB and ammons. I know PTB hasn't been a huge issue in the last few years. I've kind of attested that to NOW's been such a problem that when guys go after that, PTB is just kind of that secondary pest that gets cleaned up with everything. But it does work really well on it, especially when you go out early at that pink bug timing in the ammons. But like I said, I know a lot of guys haven't really had to go selectively for PTB, but it is a really good option for that if you need that. It's a foliar. You can put it through chemigation. We have guys that have done that before in the veggie world and get really good control. It's all about scouting. You gotta make sure you know what's out there for your pests and what timing to go out there. Definitely small early instars, the better. Just like anything, the earlier you can go, the better to help with your control. You want to go when they're actively feeding on your crop. You don't want to go when they're hibernating or when they're just hanging out. You want to make sure they're really actively feeding on that. Like I said, the whole point of the BT to work is they got to eat that leaf or eat what they're feeding on to ingest that BT for it to really just go after their midgut and really punch them dead. So do not overhead irrigate. I know there's not much of that over here. You don't want to do that for 24 to 48 hours. And then uniform coverage is, just like anything, one of the most important parts. This is another one, though, that once you put it on and it dries, it's pretty much done. While that plant's soaked and wet, you're going to get really good results. But once it's dry, it's pretty much toast. And like I touched on, rate per acre depends on what you're going after. You can repeat this usage as much as you need. In the organic system, you can go out, every 3 to 14 days. I know some guys will go out pretty much once a week through the season until the harvest is done. You can go by air or ground, regular air sprayers, hydraulic sprayers, really however else you want to go. Like I said, chemigation, whatever's easier for you, we can do that. It's just all about coverage. And then, like I said, 4 hours re-entry and 0-day PHI makes it kind of enticing in the conventional world. If you've got a fire you want to try to put out as much as you can right before harvest. And then there's just some PPE right there. It's a pretty friendly product, just long sleeves, long pants, gloves, and shoes and socks, and just a regular dust mist filter respirator. And it can be tank mixed with just about anything. The only thing we tell you in the conventional world to avoid is pyrethroids, kind of counteracts. The pyrethroid starves the insect and doesn't want them to feed, and this BT relies on them feeding. So we've done some certain trials. I did some myself this year, mixing it for NOW with an Alticore, and the grower was really happy with it. So there are options out there if you want to tank mix it. Just feel free to ask me if you have any other questions, but that pyrethroid is one that you definitely don't want to do because it's kind of just counteracting the whole point of the BT. And then I've already kind of touched on all this. So that was it. So I don't know if anyone has any questions about Debug or Dipel. I can answer them now, or I know you guys are, I'm the difference between you and a break. I'll be back at the booth after. But yeah, other than that, I can take any questions or, well, great. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate your guys' time, and have a good break.